Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Beau Taillefer and Eric Rasmussen. Season 2, Episode 9, Curriculum-Building.
Okay, Eric, so in this episode, we're going to go back and revisit the topic of curriculum. I think there's a lot of just interesting places for that to go. One of the things...
Yeah, we've spattered that conversation around a few episodes, but not ever focused on it.
Yeah, and it's definitely worth and worthy of a whole conversation to itself. With curriculum, one of the things that comes up is the idea of tracks. So you have different kinds of things you're trying to teach. So even within one subject, like music, we have a bunch of different objectives. We have tonal objectives. I mean, you have harmony objectives, so do I. Rhythm learning objectives. Even into instrumental objectives if you are teaching a specific instrument at the same time. Being able to play songs, chants. Like there's a lot going on. The tonality objectives, right? So how do we actually design a curriculum where we're doing all that, but we don't feel like we're crazily jumping from one thing to another without a plan? Like how have you thought about this in relation to MLT?
Well, I write down the things, not anymore do I write them, because they're ingrained in my soul, I guess. So what you just brushed over lightly is you really want to look deeply into what is your tonal objectives. So you want the kids to use their singing voice. First, before that, what songs do you want them to listen to? What kind of music do you want to fill their listening vocabulary with? Right? And what other kind of activities do you want to do for them to move? Like these are right? Just move, be expressive, and then they're listening to different music, whatever that content is, you've got to decide. And then if they come to you without that, you still need to add it. But I'm talking from the very, very, very beginning, and there's no student that comes to me that I don't start at the very beginning. Even if they're an adult, I would do the same thing. And then look at, are they using their singing voice? Do they start to sing in tune? And then what tonal patterns are they able to repeat? And then, right? And you just build up from there. What songs can they sing by themselves? What songs can they sing only if they're accompanied with another singer or or an accompanying instrument? And then you just, right, keep adding repertoire and more difficulty levels and other tonalities and other meters, and then you're building that same strand, if you call it a strand, or you prefer to call that what?
I just call it what specific... Edwin talks about. He calls that a track.
The track,
yeah,
okay. So yeah, no, there's very uses of vocabulary.
That's a very technical use of that word. He's talking about in a subject, you have all these different skills and content objectives that you're trying to get to, and tracks are just like a listing of that, right?
Yeah.
And you brought up something really interesting about the difference between, you were getting at this difference between these skills and like activities, behavior things you need to get people to do, like listen to music, and they move, and they use their singing voice. And those are things that are separate than content, because you could have all the great content, but if you're not getting them to sing and move, I mean, the content's not going to hit as hard. So I'm wondering if you could help like us understand how you think about the difference between content and just skills and other activities.
Yeah, well, they're married, right? Aren't they? Yeah. If you don't have a skill, you need to have the content in order to perform a skill with that content, right? Well, I've got this great skill, and you can't hear it, right? No, you got to be able to perform. You got some cases you're not using musical skills, right? You're identifying something that you recognize. And recognition comes before identification. And then what comes before recognition is that you've drawn comparisons. Mm-hmm. And what are you going to compare? So you think about, most people do major minor, well, it's really valuable to do major, minor, and then add something? Or do you want to do, you've done major, minor, now go Dorian Mixolydian because that's a really obvious pairing. But do you do, major Mixolydian and then Dorian minor? How do you want to pair that? And you want to think about these things like, maybe you should do both, but in what order? And these are very subjective decisions. Mm-hmm. Where objectively you're expanding the next easiest skill or the next easiest content for a student. Of course, all this content is easy if they've got a huge amount of movement and listening repertoire before you begin. So I always just think of the overall objectives of music learning theory, or that's not said accurately, the overall objectives of a program or a curriculum built inside of how children learn when they learn music.
There you go.
Right? Because that's, music learning theory is not a method. People still confuse it as a method, and that's one of the things Gordon literally went to his grave saying.
And I think that's an important point to bring up in regards to curriculum, because some people might be like, well, where's the textbook MLT curriculum? And the reason it doesn't exist is MLT is telling you how people learn music. What content you decide on could radically change from person to person. And that's why everyone can be a beginner, because everyone at some level of challenge is going to be needing to do listening, starting from oral, getting acculturated to something you don't understand yet.
Yep. So if you break out the recorder book,
yeah,
right, that's one of a million possible recorder books that are framed inside of music learning theory. And it's a good one to start with, I suppose. But I like to go much faster than how it's outlined there in terms of, especially, and much slower when it comes to the reading. Much faster when it comes to skills on the recorder, because Baby Shark is super easy, right? You need 4
People
notes.
make fun of Baby Shark, but how often is Sol La Do in a song? It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. and then it goes to dominant, right, at the end of the phrase, and it's a song that never ends because it always ends on dominant. So you got to start the next verse. It's a fade out kind of a song. It's not something where you ever feel ended, which makes it fun for the kids. So, and of course I use it to teach that dominant. So anyway, you line all those objectives up in one area, tonal, and then you do that again rhythmically. So, give them simple patterns, and then also give them really difficult patterns for their listening vocabulary. And you keep going all the way up to, understanding meter, recognizing meter, identifying meter. Is that the way I'm supposed to do Mary Had a Little Lamb, or is that the way that's weird? Yep. And then, right? And so you're drawing their attention to these differences so that they can recognize, and then eventually, and this will harken back to our conversation about partial synthesis, because those recognition of differences happens even before the child's 2 and 3 years old. Yep. So if you're giving them a rich variety of listening,
that's such a
and
rich
stuff
topic
to move to.
Because where you place things matters for people to if you play Mary Had a Little Lamb in major and minor right beside each other, that makes the tonality aspect easier to detect than if in the morning you played Mary Had a Little Lamb in major and then 9 hours later played it in minor. They might still notice it, but when they're right up against each other like that, oh boy.
Yeah, but that's only given that they already know Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah.
So that, right, so it goes back to, teach Mary Had a Little Lamb 100 times, or maybe, let me be serious here for a minute, at least 8 or 10 times that you got most people in your class able to do it on their own in solo.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, because often aptitude tests are laid out where it's a comparison of something you've never even heard before. But when someone has the first thing already in their memory quite a lot, it can really assist them to make the comparison because they're not struggling to retain the first one, like in their working memory. So if they know Mary Had a Little Lamb like super well, when something is different, I think part of their mind has an easier time picking up on it, because like the aptitude test can be quite challenging. Some of the questions where they just assault you with a melody and like you've never heard it, like you can't memorize it, right? Yeah, so that's cool.
Nope. So yeah, so and then what is the repertoire you want to use? And I like the repertoire I use is everything that's in my book plus stuff that I couldn't get the rights to. And then I have my playlists of great music, and you just build these things up on note cards. I really recommend note cards so you can swap things out easily and reorder them.
Yeah.
Until you're happy with what's doing, and then you go road test it.
Like index cards? Are you talking about index cards?
Yeah.
Yeah, because index cards can be very useful for planning and thinking, just because you can write a single idea down and then on a table like organize them. That's awesome.
Yeah. And now with the use of this AI stuff, you could probably do a lot quicker if you know how to use it. But it's pretty phenomenal.
That's really cool.
Some of what it can do at this early stage in AI. I mean, in public AI. It's
open source AI.
Public use of AI. So, yeah. And then you got to road test it over some years until you're really satisfied with it.
A/B testing is a really funny thing you can do with curriculum in terms of road testing it, because you could have for me it makes a lot of sense because I have like 30 students and I can send half of them in one direction and half in the other, and just within a few weeks see what's better and then switch everyone to that, rather than just like hoping I'll like discover the one best thing randomly, like without testing it. But it's worked pretty well for the guitar, actually.
Yeah. So, and there you go. Now you adapt the curriculum to your students.
And the little experiments, they might last a week or a couple of weeks. They make teaching quite fun, because if you're constantly running a new kind of hustle and trying to figure something out, like, well, is it better if I teach them to play? Like one of the ones I did, is it better to teach them to play on one string for weeks, or one string the first lesson and then start another string? And I found weeks of one string radically outperformed using two strings on the guitar when you're a beginner, just playing melodies only on one string for a few weeks. But that was something I A/B tested, enough times to... and then the curriculum has to change because of that, because I'm like, well, what songs are appropriate with this method?
So now you've got a technical consideration, like what are the procedures for teaching those techniques? So now those procedures go to you've got to add procedures to how you go about teaching tones or rhythms.
And my one string thing really was based off of getting their audiation to glue on the guitar. So once they could sing a little bit, I found if they learned to play on one string while singing, they seem to follow their singing voice more than their fingers when they play. And I found the opposite was true when I was, jumping into more technical or pattern-based stuff before they were audiating well. So, I mean, it's funny how this stuff evolves, right?
Oh, for sure. And there's some kids who pick up the coordination really easily and are very musical, and you got both, or there you have one bigger than the other.
I have a brother and sister that I teach
other.
Right next to each other, and one has much stronger audiation on the melodies we're playing at guitar right now, but her technique is all over the place. She's just using one finger. But her brother is more rhythmically powerful, and he wants to play chords, and his technique is unreal. And they're both great musicians, but like she's definitely better at audiating like tonality, and he's more of, into the chords and the rhythm stuff. But it's fascinating to see, like, if you just let things unfold a little bit naturally with a plan behind it. I mean, these two students start on the same day and they're doing totally different things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. That's the whole thing is making the lesson effective, and you're not going to make it effective if you're teaching that lesson that's built into that curriculum, right? Using these procedures and sticking to that like it's gospel. and it's not. You're teaching a range, of students with a range of abilities that are all over the map. Harmonic, tonal, rhythm, aptitude, movement, vocabulary, right? Psychology comes to play, and a child that doesn't want to perform in front of peers, another one that shows off all the time and is terrible.
Yep. Let me read this. Let me read this Sun Tzu quote. Did I read this on the podcast yet?
I don't think so.
Okay, here we go. Sun Tzu teaching us how to teach music. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. What are the infinite variety of circumstances for a music teacher? Your students' aptitude, interest, music, like how much are they practicing? If they're having a rough life out of music class, I mean, you can't expect them to be doing hours of practice. So you have to take all this into account, but you have to also know what you're doing. You can't just do whatever I feel like and hope they learn. You got to be flexible, but have some theory. And that's why I think MLT rocks, is because Gordon didn't spend his time making a method, right? He spent his time figuring out what's going on. I love that. And that's what I think Eric is up to with his harmonic learning sequence. And that's why I originally reached out to him, because I was learning jazz tunes and I was like, I can do this, but there's got to be a more efficient way, because young kids are learning 1, 4, 5 with Eric in one lesson. So why, it's something that he's doing that other people don't understand. And I mean, it's basically applying this to harmony, but to me, it's odd how, in my brain, Eric, when I think about the content and skills, harmony is this own category, next to tonality and next to melody. But I feel like tonality kind of gets lumped in to cover all this stuff, and people aren't thinking as detailed as they could about each of these tracks. And your curriculum takes the harmonic track really seriously, and it sequences it in a very rational and efficient way, and just plows through.
I just found something that was missing, accidental or not. I was purposeful, but I mean, it was still kind of an accident. But, once I opened that box, I just drilled down as hard as I could and as long as I could. And I got the results that were astonishing to me, because I was just and I played Dixieland jazz or, traditional jazz for so long. It was astonishing to me how much better my own harmonic audiation got when the kids that I were teaching were ahead of me. A handful of kids that were just able to do dominance of your traditional diatonic functions.
Secondary dominance. That's where the cache is.
Yeah. So once you've got your things mapped out and the ways to do it mapped out, and then you got to be creative in the classroom is my ultimate goal, so that you're able to go back and pick up and know exactly what you should do to pick up to get the kid either more solid at what they're doing or advance to the next content or the next level of learning. And to do that and know that in my mind, at this point, when I've had a kid for 2 or 3 years and now they're in first grade or kindergarten, that I am teaching all things at the same time, all levels of learning, not content at the same time. You're doing content and the content, but I'm giving them oral, I'm giving them verbal association, I'm giving them labels for things that they already can recognize and need to learn to identify, and I can always go back to exactly what they need to be prepared to do that with ease or with enough that they get it right, so that they are feeling like they're learning. And we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same page with that. One of the reasons I like these separate tracks in the way that Engelman talks about tracks for music learning is that you can have a student with a bunch of different content. Like you said, they're here with oral, but they're here with verbal association on a totally different piece of content. Now they're here, maybe doing writing with something else, and they're improvising using something else. Like, you can have a lot of content unfolding on different skill levels. And I mean, that's why I don't really follow the I'm not necessarily doing verbal association for tonal and rhythm every single class for something brand new, but I'm more interested in like, am I covering something in these bases once they get going and keeping the learning, you know, really successful. And like you said, at the end of the day, fun in the class, because if the kids aren't learning and having fun, they're probably not going to get fully into it. I think at this level for sure.
Yeah, and that's a function of a teaching style that you bring. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be fun, but you could be engaging in other ways that is. It's just that you're not introducing any more stress than is necessary.
I'm a big fan of changing my style, like especially one-on-one when I'm with different students, because some students literally just want to be like shown a cool song, but with a lot of my students, they want to call the shots on what songs they learn. And so I'll just teach them the basic melody. If I feel like they're ready for any of the other content or skills in the song, I'm always showing the tonic chord and maybe a dominant chord in here or there, even at the beginning. But I'm letting them call the shots more so it unfolds differently. But I'm a big fan of changing your style. If kids want to improvise more, open the floor for that a bit more. And
so that's about the delivery of the curriculum based on the child's needs in the moment. But I want to go back to, what did you develop, and write down and adhere to, at least to some degree, the process, the sequence of going from this skill to this skill to this skill to this skill, and knowing how, and write that down exactly how you would teach it if every lesson was 100% spot on and every child was the same, right? So do that work, because you can't improvise and be creative in the classroom if you don't already have like what is the thing to do when like say I got a second grader is still not singing in tune and everybody else is doing tonic dominant, subdominant, major minor easily, right? So forget by second grade I have them doing all the tonalities except Locrian.
Come on.
All the normal tonalities, right? So I just refuse not to do that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I'm at this point with a class that is my first year I've had them back since the pandemic, and I frankly didn't remember this one girl was even in my class. So I think it was 2 or 3 years. She's 8 now, and we're now doing comparing Phrygian and Lydian. We've got that. I haven't done Locrian other than that the kids like to say, "Oh, resting tone T."
You should compare
just to make me play a song and something I don't like.
You should compare Locrian to Phrygian because it's really close. Like a bunch of melodies, like one note. It's very.
Well, we're doing we are, but we haven't gotten there yet. We did major minor, and then I did Dorian Mixolydian, and then I go back and do major Mixolydian, and then Dorian minor.
Yeah. Those once you get there,
that's
that's a lot of comparisons.
Yeah, and once you get there, then you then I add one at a time and I compare each to the other if it makes sense to.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that makes sense, but eventually you got to be able to go major minor Dorian Mixolydian. What am I playing? And I teach them how to, I teach them the tricks they can use in their audiation and write songs.
Did I ever tell you the story about this guitar lesson I took with this great Canadian guitar player? The first lesson, he just had you improvise using all the tonalities over like a single B note. And that's how he would assess like where to put you on his program, basically. Yeah. So like first lesson, we're soloing with like harmonic or like melodic minor modes. And he's like, oh yeah, the tonalities and stuff. Cause a lot of people he gets like can't play in Dorian or Aeolian or major, they just haven't learned how to do that. But for whatever reason, this culture of guitarists, it's very common that people actually learn the tonalities, which is, I think, what happened to me when I was in high school. I was actually learning tonalities, and a lot of people were just learning major and minor. And then they'd like randomly hear a Dorian song, but they didn't really know like how to make a song. Yeah, I mean,
so yeah, and write music, right? So if you're not writing music, then you're probably stuck with the repertoire, or always looking for repertoire that suits your needs. And so my kids, were pretty good at Dorian Mixolydian, Mixolydian ends on so is resting tone so, and Dorian is resting tone re. We knew resting tone re and resting tone so for a few months before we start calling them Dorian and Mixolydian.
Sure.
Unless they're super smart kids, and you can add, if the intelligence or the word intelligence, the language learning is easy for them as well as the music learning. You've got to keep them interested and keep pushing them, right? Because otherwise they're bored about something, and you don't want to. So anyway, I made a song for the kids that we started for learning Dorian. So Ian and Jack, the kids who live next door. And we repeat that, and some of you will get this. Ian and Jack, the kids who live next door. Ian and Jack, the kids who live next door. Ian and Jack, right, Ian, or Jack, I'm sorry, next door. Ian and Jack, right, Dorian, and it's like funny for them. And they're singing in, right? And then I think another line of this will be, they got a dog at the pet store. And then the dog came home and, look at the cushion he tore up,
Those are wild, like to teach young kids. Those are crazy rhythms.
Well, it's just a 7/8 thing. It was easy for them to learn.
I love it.
Because they already have that. It's just, it's a weird thing. And we're going to get this on an episode. I didn't even realize this was a 7/8 tune. I thought it was all kinds of funky stuff, but it's not. It's, there's something funny about it, and I have to go back and look at it theoretically because my audiation didn't want to do it in 7/8. It's so funny to me. But at any rate, you're teaching the skill of labeling while you're also teaching the skill of singing.
Like, you mean labeling in terms of diction?
This.
You mean in terms of using the actual lyrics?
Hold on a second.
Like that, or an actual labeling of the musical content?
That they're labeling Dorian because the song is about
that label.
Ian and Jack.
Okay.
So they're learning Dorian while they're singing. It's like singing the rules. Resting. Resting tone do ba da da whatever. Yeah. However you want to sing resting tone do.
It's funny. It's kind of like you're using the label. You're teaching the label, but also teaching it like kind of like a mnemonic or memory aid to help it stick. Which I like that. That's cool.
Yeah. That it's just these little things that you do both at the same time, makes things more efficient. It's fun. That the kids were involved in the creativity of it. They have ownership of that song.
I mean, that's a great place in terms of curriculum. Writing songs really counterbalances having an organized curriculum. It can add that element of play and creativity without throwing off your whole structure.
Yeah, and I have all those, of course, all my tonality songs in the book. This is a new one that I like better. Not as a piece of music, I like it better for the technique because it does the three essential functions right away. And so all I'm doing is I'm making my teaching of Dorian more efficient that way, and more fun and more musical, not just, okay, today, we're going to learn Dorian. You guys already know Dorian, and the resting tone is Re when we're in Dorian.
Yeah, there really is an art to the delivery of this, and both an efficient but pleasurable way to go through as the student.
Yeah, and then of course I take the first two or the last two bars of every Dorian song that they've learned and play it so that these are all the same. These are all the same. These are all the same. By what? Not by their songs, not by their words. By what? Why are these the same? It's like they're all Dorian.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you say, is this Dorian or not Dorian? And then you do that. And then you do Dorian, this is Mixolydian or not Mixolydian, tell me, right? And then you do Dorian Mixolydian. So doing those in the proper sequence is part of your curriculum. And you can't do that without having written out exactly how you want to do this.
Totally.
And then there's still the creativity piece of when they're ready, go for it. And the kids are hungry. You can tell when they're on the precipice of something new. Go take them, whether it's too advanced or not. Sometimes I break out the notation right away. Your standard, chordal notation in Roman numerals. Because then they have a visual connection to everything they've got orally. Yeah. And if they're ready, just do it. It's not like, they already understand the differences among these tonalities or among these meters or among, so, and then the only other thing, which really doesn't have necessarily a strong binding sequence, is my movement, repertoire. I'm not necessarily doing 5, 8, 7, 8 stuff with 2 and 3 year olds, although I do.
Sure.
But that's not. I throw it in there, but I'm really, but eventually, in terms of just the repertoire that they're listening to, has just all I can say is just make sure you've got your counterbalancing of heavy to light and everything in between, counterbalancing of so that you've got the extremes of movement in a piece or between pieces.
Yeah.
Within and between, and do both, style changes and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. That's kind of the point when you're teaching.
And that's why I've picked the music I have on my list.
Yeah.
So my playlist.
I was going to say, when you're teaching something, you should be very aware that variety is going to help people understand the main thing you're teaching. So if you're teaching a rhythm pattern, doing something like it with different varieties is going to make the original one more clear to the student. And so, like, anytime you want to teach a skill or content specifically, you should be positioning other things like it next to it. Like, if you're going to teach major, you should teach minor and Mixolydian and Dorian, and then compare them all to each other. If you're going to teach meters, you teach duple and triple, and then these odd, and you compare them with each other. And so anytime you're teaching a skill, even when it's movement, you need to have these variety of activities that highlight the range of what you're trying to teach. And that's what all this is about. How do you strategically put those things in your classroom so that people are learning the most that they can from the fewest examples? Because if I could teach you what major is with 4 examples, 2 or 3 examples, rather than needing like 100 songs to do it, that's just more efficient. You can have the volume up there in terms of how much listening content and performing content. But if you can teach these concepts, musical concepts, audiation-based concepts, meter, tonality, with just a few examples, it's so efficient. It's just... And then students develop this habit, like Eric, you've seen this. When you teach like this, they're always hunting down what tonality the song is. They're always hunting down what chords are in the song. They're always hunting down like the tonal pattern. Like, they just get in this habit of knowing what they're doing. And the cool thing is, if they don't know it, they also know that not understanding is a level that they're at, and they learn to interact with unfamiliar stuff. It's wild. So they get so used to knowing that when they don't know, they're like, hey, I don't know this. And then it shows up as something really that they don't know.
And it's interesting to them that they don't know it, because, right, in a young person's mind, they think they've got a lot already, and they don't have hardly a nickel. Yep. But that's good. That's just the nature of them learning. I teach these tonalities with the 3 basic functions. That's it. And I stop using the songs as much as the basic functions when I draw when I play, tonic, subdominant, dominant, tonic, right, in major. And I say, does this match? And I say a song that they know instantly. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to do it that way or this way? And that's another one that's in my book, but I don't use in my book, I don't use the 3 teaching tonalities by only using 3 functions. Mm-hmm. In addition to the other stuff, and to the typical way that I do it. Mm-hmm. Listen to it this way and do it. After starting to read our friend Zig, Theory of Instruction, I go back and I find so much of what I've done is using it.
Yeah, that's why it blew my mind.
It just, it came from the kids. So, what else are you going to find? Only that which is in the kids.
Yeah.
That you start to play around with this, and you get to be creative in the classroom. You get to be creative about your curriculum building inside of the curriculum that you've already set out. Then you need to, like I said, go through and really write down exactly how to deliver some of the things that we're doing. Some of it you won't need to. You'll just need. You won't need to work hard at. It'll be like how to use fingerings on piano and technical things that are just so obvious to you. But in terms of audiation, are you really honed your teaching down, and what are the all the listening and all the performing and all the preparation for that and all the skills and all the content along the way. If you're haphazard, which I was for quite a while until I really started to hone my curriculum, for my specific purpose, my curriculum,
sure,
short of harmonic learning sequence, is not something anybody else can take into their, well, you could incorporate it into anything, of course, but it's not the foundation for, well, maybe it is partly the foundation as much as learning sequence is.
The harmonic stuff?
As harmonic learning sequences.
Yeah, I mean, in my own, I think you brought up something good about different teachers having different uses and possibly different goals. But in mine, I just separate melody and harmony. There's like a clean divide. So knowing tonality to me is different than being able to sing melodies and do harmony. So I treat that as a separate skill. But that one's pretty fast to learn how to do. But then the kind of melody / tonal pattern side for me is radically different than the harmony side. They are different areas that have to be approached with like a different track, and tonal patterns ironically help you learn both, but you're missing something in harmony if you never hear the notes all at once and only do tonal patterns. So tonal patterns serve their purpose, but I think we need something like what you have, the harmonic learning series type of induction to learn harmony. And so, I mean, but that's just my own opinion based off of like knowing Eric and trying this stuff, because I've tried to do it other ways. It just doesn't work as well as adding this stuff in on the guitar and the piano. But I have a very, specific set of goals that I'm doing. I want people on the piano. I mean, my main goal, whether you're taking classical piano or just pop piano, I want you to be able to play melodies by ear and figure melodies out and just play some chords that fit with them. I mean, because if you can't do that, you can't play blues, you can't play classical music, whatever. I just got to get you started.
Yeah, I want them to be creative, not just read the scores of the popular, quote unquote popular, piano pieces that are out there. Whether even if they're, the top level stuff, Tchaikovsky piano concerto or something.
Yeah, often how well they've been through traditional curriculum has no correlation with how fast they'll learn to do what I'm getting them to do. Some kids are like up there in the Royal Conservatory stuff, and they can't like play some chords by ear and make a song, and so they're at like ground zero for learning those skills because they're not learning patterns, in their audiation. Well, I think that was a fun conversation about curriculum. It's really one of those topics that we could probably record like 20 hours of conversation about curriculum, and we could just have a podcast about curriculum. So we got to draw the line somewhere. But I think they're really,
that gets you started, and we'll revisit for sure as we go. And we thread things all throughout, so I don't.
Yeah, it's a fun conversation.
We don't have necessarily a good curriculum of podcasting yet.
Yeah.
How to deliver this out.
Well, I mean, I think we have something here. We have something like we like talking about MLT, but we also like talking to random people that are just good at what they do, and then we also like bringing in psychology and other things. So I mean, that's kind of those are the tracks here, right? Like you're getting some psychology here. There's not really a way around it. I don't know how you could talk about how someone learns music without some discussion of psychology. Like it's influencing it, right?
For sure.
Okay. Well, till next time.
All right. Thanks, man. Alrighty.